Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted that you're here once again to continue this conversation, this learning experience about first century Aramaic forgiveness. Delighted that you get to be a part of it and that you get to teach us as we learn on deeper and deeper levels the truth of who we are as human beings and the willingness to embrace, rather than doing the standard game of projection and blaming somebody else for what's going on inside of us. It's an awesome opportunity to, in life, it's like, what an opportunity to actually own the perceptual constructs of our own mind, own the energies that are moving within us, rather than make pictures out of other people and pretend that other people are the cause of what's going on inside of us. Remembering that perception is a construct, a series of pictures and sensations that are generated by the mind, and the ones that come up, though we insist they must tell us about somebody else, are always telling us about ourselves, especially when there's an emotional energy attached to it, connected to it. So emotions are also constructs, oftentimes passed from generation to generation. And our objective here is to learn to own those constructs of our minds and recognizing how the constructs are generated, removing the ones that never belonged within our minds in the first place, which means literally facing all forms of hostility or fear and removing them from our minds. The removal process is called forgiveness. And as I choose to own and remove those constructs, it's like, for most people, body, minds, generational patterns, genes filled with hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, trauma, blame, are like a vase filled with dirty water. What do you do if you want to change it? Well, you've got to start to extract some of the water. You can't extract what you can't own. Therefore, you've got to take responsibility for it. And keep pouring in clean, clear water. And the most reliable way that I've found, the most consistent, persistent way that I've found to address those things is to apply the first century tool of forgiveness. That's how it works. That's what it's designed for. The removal of all forms of hostility or fear. What would life be like if we were totally and completely restored to the simple presence of love, instead of, who knows, whatever, degrading thoughts about ourselves, about others, what would it look like if everybody in the world woke up tomorrow morning and said, oh, love is my true nature. I'm going to stop pretending that I express as other than love because of what somebody else does, and own what goes on in my own mind. I'm going to literally forgive everything unlike love and live as we're designed to live as human beings. It's the cause of all the seemingly unresolvable pain, anger, and suffering Well, the one thing that perpetuates it is blame. When I think or speak as though something inside of me is caused by something going on outside of me, that I'm in blame. That's the way to make sure and guarantee that you keep it. Contrary to what the world generally presents today as forgiveness, I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. The Aramaic tool of forgiveness is a tool that removes literally any form of suffering, pain, fear, and or hostility from within, and empowers one to wake up to the joy of who we really are. When one applies forgiveness, they're freed of the repeated playing out of unconsciously driven abuses of the generations, which otherwise control, especially when we're stressed, each individual's perceptions, decisions, and behaviors. And that being controlled by the unconscious dynamics in the ancient teaching was laid out in that parable about those who were lost in the desert for 40 years, supposedly lost in a hot, sandy place, about 35 square mile area, for 40 years. They really were that lost in that small an area? Do you think it was really about being lost in a hot, sandy place? I would offer that the desert is a code word for the unconscious. The old generation, the root of that word generation in the Latin is genari, which means cause. When they said to get out of the desert, the old generation has to die off, they weren't talking about old physical bodies dying. They were saying the unconscious causes of aberrant behavior, of pain, of trauma, need to be faced, owned, and removed. Until one is free of the repeated patterns of their generations, they're lost in the desert again. So when you start approaching this from several different disciplines, from science, from spiritual psychology, from brain-mind science, genetics, epigenetics, physiology, and then you add in the first century Aramaic understanding, it makes a really crisp, clear picture of the human dilemma and the how-to of resolving the seemingly uncontrollable unconscious expressions. Resolvable. You know, there's a story that we shared. It's been a while since we've talked about it, so it might be an appropriate time to bring it into the fray. Imagine you're drinking coffee and somebody bumps your arm. The coffee spills. So you say to the person's coffee spill, well, why did the coffee spill? Now, the spill obviously occurred because of the bump on the arm, but the reason for coffee being all over everything is because there was coffee in the cup. When you ferret it out, that you spilled and what you spilled are totally different matters. But the mind tends to blend them into one and get stuck in errant conclusions, like the logical conclusion is I spilled my coffee because you bumped my arm. No, you didn't spill your coffee because I bumped your arm. You spilled your coffee because there was coffee in the cup. If there'd been tea in the cup, you spilled tea. You put in orange juice, you'd have spilled orange juice. You know, the mess you'd had to clean up wouldn't have been coffee. Yes, the spill had to do with what was in the cup, the content. But when you start to approach it with a really discerning mind, you see that the spill and the content are not one and the same. And recognize that it's inevitable that life bumps and squeezes us, each of us, and whatever content we're holding within comes out again and again, oftentimes, sadly, against our own will and choice. So then the question becomes, what's in my cup? When under stress, what seeps into awareness and oozes out of me? Love, joy, aliveness, enthusiasm, gratitude, serenity? And if it isn't, do I have somebody else to blame for it? Or can I grow up and say, oh, look what's coming out of my cup? Because if it's the disease states of fear, frustration, rage, sarcasm, put-downs, and attack, I'd offer that's all self-inflicted. If those things are in one's cup, they're there because we've accepted them and chosen them. Or maybe not chosen them, but decided on having those energetic patterns. There's an interesting story in the book of Thomas where Yeshua, he's being attacked by the Pharisees, and some of the disciples basically say to him, why don't you just talk to them? Why don't you give them back some of their own mess? And Yeshua responds, and he says, I have none of that in my store. What's in your store? Well, when you're squeezed, you can tell what's in your store. And long ago, for most people, far beneath recall, somewhere in the past, perhaps even in our genes, destructive decisions were made. Content was installed. Interaction with a power person reinforced and played out those things. And it's often the power person dynamic that sets the stage for what comes up and out when we're squeezed. Remember that a power person is someone in our lives who, at a given moment, was not functioning as love, had more control over our lives than we did. And if we perceived the circumstance was physical, mental, emotional, or psychological survival, then a power person dynamic was instilled in the mind that will tend to control our whole lives until we resolve that dynamic. If you've been abandoned, attacked, victimized, verbally, physically, sexually abused, the voices and behaviors that perpetrated the offenses will attempt to speak through you as your voice. An abusive parent tends to raise an abusive child. The abusive father tends to raise an abusive son. The daughter of a degrading, critical parent has difficulty responding to stress with something other than degrading criticism. And when under stress, those dynamics will tend to control perception, the emotions, the thoughts, the decisions, the behaviors. And how often after you said something, you say, oh, I wish I'd never said that. When squeezed, we get a chance to look at what's in there. And as we've shared before, under the influence of the power person, it's only 3 behaviors until that dynamic's faced in the light of truth, resolved and healed. Which of the 3 behaviors runs the mind at any given moment will be controlled by the level of stress we're under. And through unconsciously motivated behaviors, each new generation will tend to pick up on and be controlled by that good old family feeling. And each generation is controlled by the inherited genetic influences that were stimulated into activity by the modeling provided by whomever the power person was at the moment. A little known fact is that stress is the key factor in determining which level of behavior is active in controlling the mind. And all stress is internally created. All stress is created by goals, not by events. Now, it appears to the uneducated observer the events push up against us, and that determines how hard life is squeezing us. But if you observe carefully, the truth is, if you have no goals regarding a particular event, there will be no stress involved in experiencing that event. It'll just be something that happened. I remember when, Junior did a particular behavior and Dad just sat there and smiled. Why did Mom go off the rails? Because of Junior's behavior? Or because the aberrant behavior was resonated to activity by Junior's actions when Junior violated a goal? That was linked to that behavior we call berserk. Dad had no such goal, no such linkage, hence was able to just smile in response to what seemed to cause Mom a great deal of pain. But it didn't cause Mom a great deal of pain. The pain was internal. Junior violating the goal just resonated what was already inside, what was there to be squeezed out. And of course, having children is like having your unconscious mind hanging out in true living color and Dolby sound. If you manage your goals, you manage your mind. Refuse to manage your mind, and its generational content will manage your life for you. And it probably won't be pretty or fulfilling. So the three behaviors, when there's low or no stress, we'll tend to do whatever we did to get along with our power person. As stress starts to build, we'll shift into doing whatever we did to resist and survive with our power person. And when ultra-stressed, the mind will counsel us to do whatever our power person did to us that we hated the most. So when life squeezes us, we get to look at the power person dynamic, what we're full of. Most will lie to themselves and engage in a false narrative that they are only steeped in or exuding rage or viciousness or sadness or fear or criticism or condemnation or victimhood or depression, whatever it is, that they're only experiencing that because they've been squeezed. They insist that the squeeze was the cause, when in truth, the squeeze was only the trigger. Pretending that what comes up in us, in the way of words, feelings, and behaviors, is actually caused by the squeeze, rather than the squeeze revealing the content that's already there, one hides from themselves the opportunity to heal, to remove the pained underpinnings of their repeated disturbed states. And we're here to support the confrontation of and the healing of every disturbed state of every mind, heart, and being on the planet, ultimately. The mind that functions in denial tends to overlay events with content and blurs this distinction. Denial is the big key. And denial, as we said before, is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us. So when one lives in denial, the events in a person's life and the content aroused by those events are confused, and the mind tricks us into thinking that events cause the content rather than realizing that they only reveal the content. And the typical language for one caught in this error are always made up of statements like, you made me, you hurt me, you frightened me, you really have a problem. But the question always remains, if they're the one with the problem, why am I the one with the pain? What work do I have to do? Am I willing to do that work, or am I going to continuously put off doing that work by pretending that somebody else is the problem in my life? If they are the one with the problem, why am I the one with the pain? And is it time to grow into adulthood and actually go, that just brought some pain up for me. I think instead of blaming you, I think I'll own my pain. I think I'll do some work here. Obviously, if they were the one with the problem, they'd be the one with the pain. If I have pain, and I think it's somebody else's problems, perhaps I have a problem that I'm hiding from myself. And that's what we describe as unconsciousness. Hiding something from myself to the point where I lose awareness of it is called dissociation. Again, hiding something from myself to the point where I lose awareness of it is called dissociation. So how do we create this dissociation? The simple act of thinking or speaking as though something outside is what's causing this energy to move in me. Or pardon me, I should say, to be more correct, is the cause of this energy which is moving in me. Living in denial means we dissociate from the real cause of the upset, hiding the content of our own mind, and refuse to allow that content to enter conscious awareness. And the result of this error is destructive blame. And blame is the act of putting responsibility outside of ourselves for content that belongs to us, refusing to own it, and staying stuck in the error of thinking others have to change in order for us to be happy. When one lives in denial and blame, life becomes infinitely more complex. Because blame brings along its brothers, fear and hostility, and a whole host of life-destroying emotions. The father of hostility, desire. The desire to anesthetize the pain whose cause appears to be outside of us, but is really within. And Miss Jeannie just told me that we have somebody with a hand up, so let's say hello to our caller.
We actually have two hands up. The first one was
awesome, great.
610. You're on the air.
Hey, well, I have a couple of things. I just went to the hand surgeon because my hand, there are some problems with the surgery. And one thing he said is this hand needs heat. And I told him about the Avicen, and he looked it up. He said, I haven't heard of this. So I've got this, hand surgeon and physical therapist having a look at the Avicen. We'll see what happens. But I told him what I'd been doing, and he said, sounds good. Keep doing it.
Well, and remember that you don't have to put the hand that's injured into the Avicen in order for it to get the heat treatment.
Right.
Within 10 minutes, the other hand is getting its heat without it. Now, if the hand that's had the surgery can actually go in the machine and handle the pressure of it, great. But if not, you still get the heat treatment if that's what he wants on it. And it's heat delivered from the inside. It's going to be a whole lot more efficient than heat that's delivered from the outside.
Oh, great. Yeah. I've been able to put that hand in it. It's healed, externally healed, but there are I'm back in a splint for a while. But he said, take the splint off and put it in that thing. So, and otherwise, heat is good. Yeah. So I have something I want to work on, but I thought maybe you ought to take the other caller, and because this might take a while.
Well, here we are, and the other caller might take a while as well, and so we're with you.
Okay.
And that's kind of how you order things. So go for it.
All right. Well, I would love to have, I've been doing wake-up sheets on our Michael, and I want to say I want to love him, but I know we don't love anybody. So I'm holding a space of love, and I can do that. There have been multiple problems. He's a hurt person, you know. He needs a lot of financial and other kinds of support, emotional. He has no friends, no family. He has an ex-wife, actually probably lives within 10 blocks of here, and he won't even tell me who she is. And I said, if something happened to you, we'd want to contact her. Oh, no, they don't need to know. He has 2 brothers that he doesn't want even any news sent to them. So there are huge family things. And he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't seem concerned. He just says, they don't get me. I was the black sheep of the family, and they don't want me around. And of course, I think it's more like he doesn't want them around. But in any case, I had this thought, which is kind of crazy, but Jeannie and you and I talked about this ages ago. We were going to have a 3rd child until we found out she was a Down's child, and she wouldn't have lived anyway. But the fact is, we didn't welcome her. And I'm thinking maybe this is my chance to make up for that in some way, to welcome this person who needs more support than we feel as if we can emotionally always give. And he's got financial problems too that are weighing on us, and we are taking care of multiple people, several family members, 3 of the 4 grandchildren, 3 of the 5 grandchildren needing college tuitions and housing and food, a lot of financial pressure. And this is a man who his beat-up car out in front, he got 2 tickets. I didn't see them, but it's been sitting there too long, and the police stopped by, and I gave him the tickets, and he said, I can't pay for these. And he's very passive, so he's not working. He's just gone to a little job that I got for him, 1 job every other week, playing at an old people's home, playing guitar and singing. He does a very nice job. But Tim is now having to drive him around because we've loaned my car to a refugee that's another story. So on several levels, we're feeling a little overwhelmed, but I thought it would be so much easier if I felt at least really fondly toward this person. As it is, I have to do wake-up sheets and journal writing to stay holding a loving space. And yet, putting him out now with things in the world the way they are and winter coming, it's just out of the question. We're not going to do that. So Tim and I both ask ourselves, are we helping this guy or are we hurting him? Are we enabling him or what? We don't know. It seems like at least a combination. So I'd love to hear your take on any suggestions you might make about that.
Well, what I hear is that what you've got going is an exchange, and is the exchange balanced? I hear that perhaps there's some thoughts that you're being treated unfairly, and if so, then 2 things that you might want to look at is, 1, is that a projection, being treated unfairly? Is that, how does it look like your life to be treated unfairly? Is that an old reality for you? And is that coming up for healing? Then if it is, then I'd be doing some work around being treated unfairly. And then the second component would be, if it's a fact that you're being treated unfairly, then what communication has to happen between you to clean that up. I mean, does there need to be more input from his side? What needs to happen in order to have you, once you've cleaned up any component you have that's an issue you bring to the party that needs healing, once you've done that, then what communication needs to occur in order for fairness to happen? Just straight up, honest communication. Gee, I understand you can't pay for those 2 tickets, but I don't want to have to pay for everything you happen to incur in your life, and you go out and get careless and incur more. I don't want to be obligated to that, so I'll be happy to take care of those 2 tickets, but here's what I would like in exchange, and make sure that there's fairness. And I certainly understand your compassion and your willingness to shelter him, especially with, as you say, with winter coming. And so that I'd see those 2 components. What fits? Where are the issues? Is there a fair exchange happening, and or is there a reality coming up for you that could really use some healing in this regard?
That's a great question. That is really good. He has been helping more, but he has a bad back, and he now is wearing a back brace, and he can't continue to do what he's been doing, which is a little scary to me. And I know I'm blaming him for causing scare, but it seems as if his needs are escalating and his abilities are shrinking for legitimate reasons. But I think we're dealing with a person who's he's using a cane now. It's hard for him to walk any distance. He's very out of shape. Going up and down stairs is hard for him. And so I'm thinking, I'm projecting into the future too. Are we taking care of somebody more than we're taking care of my sister and my grandboys? And there's this refugee at church, and there's another refugee, and we're trying to watch out for them. And I'm getting in a little too deep, I guess. But the need in the world seems so great that I'm always just waiting when things can out. I was thinking of Jesus too. He didn't have a place to live, so he didn't have to offer anybody a place to live. But on the other hand, he didn't have a place to live, and he did go off and rest sometimes. He just said, I got to get out of here, and climbed into the mountains, whatever he did.
Need an intermission.
Yeah, intermission, right. So
I'd ask another question.
Wonderful suggestion. Yeah.
So another question I would ask is it fear coming up for you, or is it reasoned concern? If it's fear, then I would suggest there's a place for you to do some forgiveness to clean that up. And if it's reasoned concern, that's a reasonable thing to do, to have concern and to do things in a way that make them doable, reasonable, and manageable. And, if it's actual fear coming up in you, how does fear look like your life? Is that some worksheet material for you to clean up fear? And then get to the point, is it reasonable for me to have concern? And concern might look like, well, this man has disabilities, and I'm seeing them become more and more impactful, and we certainly can't take responsibility for him in a disabled state. So maybe your reasoned concern, if that's what it is inform you that it's time for him to get in touch with state resources and or see if there are some community resources to assist him in his disability. Just if I'm concerned about he's using a cane, he's got a back brace, he's not able to, is it really fear that's coming up for you, or is it just reasoned and reasonable concern for the circumstance and for what you're obligating yourself to? Give it a thought?
Hi, sorry. I touched my ear, and I have a hearing aid, and it hung up. I got everything.
Cut out. Okay.
I called right back in, but I had to press 1 and alert Jeannie that I didn't disappear on purpose.
No problem.
Yeah. Yes, the reason concerned, I do think it's reason concerned. I'm not terrified, but I'll think about that too. Thank you so much. And so
it might be time to just do some research for disability resources for someone in his position, so that, if it goes to a level where it's not reasonable for you to be his caregiver or his shelter, that he has access to. And the other side of the coin that I hear in this interaction is, and maybe it's one of the reasons why a former wife, why brothers don't want anything to do with him, is that he keeps putting off the responsibility on everybody else. And there comes a point where, if that's the game someone's playing, that it's reasonable to say, and I'm not willing for you to put responsibility for your life on me. Like, you need to step up to the plate. And so there's where it, and of course you have to determine what the line is. There's where enabling becomes a problem. It's not a gift. Support is a gift. So you just have to ask the question, is this enabling, that I'm allowing him to just let his life go? And is it time to make some demands of him, whether the demands are you need to get some, disability support, or you need to step up and start to do some work and deal with what's going on with your body. Back pain, best definition I've heard of yet, comes from a medical doctor, Dr. John Sarno, and it's unconscious rage. Yeah. And, it's like
there's a lot of
gift
that
to give him there. Yeah, well, then it might be time to start to invite him to take responsibility. You're still doing the Wednesday support group, right?
Right.
Have you invited him to attend?
I could. I don't think he would. He's, any kind of suggestion, there's a lot of resistance. I pretty much stay out of things because there's so much resistance. I certainly can invite him. Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Well, it might be.
Do that.
Yeah, in the context of what you're saying, it might be time to make a demand. He's making demands on you, which you're, generously willing to fulfill. And it might be time to make a demand on him, and that is, I see you deteriorating, you're putting things off, you're not taking responsibility, and you need to do something. So here's something that I know can be of assistance to you, and I'm going to strongly request, or maybe require, that a condition of being here is that you start to pick up and do some work on yourself. I know you've broached that subject with him before, but if he's in a deteriorating condition physiologically, especially, it might be reasonable to insist that he step up. I mean, I've watched people who are literally laid up with back pain that they can't get out of bed, and they start to do their work, and they're up and bouncing around. So, maybe invite him to watch Sarno's video, and maybe calling him out on that might be a gift. And it's all, it sounds like it's all a balancing act.
Yeah. All right. One more comment on something completely different. You were talking about how you had this exercise of people looking into one another's eyes, total strangers looking into one another's eyes. I was thinking that is not very different from looking at a newborn, because you're not looking at someone with any history that you're aware of. You're seeing the person. And so that's sort of a wonderful way to get in. Anyway, it just struck me that I could do that because I don't know them. Much harder with somebody I know, or I think I know.
And in the experiments they did with this, if I remember correctly, and it's been a few years since I've read the research on it, there was a whole thing published on it. One of the arenas they did work in was between the Palestinians and the Jews, who certainly had a history. They weren't people who had a personal history, but they certainly had a history that led to some pretty violent and vile actions. But when they brought them into this neutral place and just had them do this process of, in essence, a love exchange, things changed, and it led to a tremendous amount of healing.
That's so good.
So maybe inviting him to do a love exchange with you.
And I put those links in yesterday's notes, too. There's 4 of them where they did different experiments.
Okay. Gosh, there's a lot of discomfort coming up in me with you suggesting I do that with Michael. Whoa.
So let me just see if let me rephrase that and see if I got it right. Me extending the pure presence of my being to Michael brings up resistance for me.
It certainly does. Yeah, good rewording.
I'd say you just uncovered some worksheets, young lady.
I think so.
I mean, all it requires of you is standing in a space of connectedness with the love that you are.
Okay.
What does he resonate in you that would be something worthy of resisting?
Oh boy. His total exposure. His total vulnerability. I don't want to look at it.
His or yours?
Well, it's easier to say it's his. Obviously, it's mine.
Yes.
Holy shit, Michael. Yep.
It sounds like someone living in that kind of poverty mindset resonates a part of you that it's time perhaps to open.
Oh, yeah. Why don't you ask that other person onto the line now?
Are you trying to get out of this conversation?
Yeah. I wrote it down. I've got it in my head, but that's good. You don't mess around.
Well, I'll hold the space. I'll hold the space that whatever it is that comes up inside of you when you think about being that intimate with him, that you're willing and able to forgive it.
Thanks. That's what's going to be needed.
Well, we'll be holding the space.
Thanks.
All right. Well, anything else on your mind for today?
No, I said go get.
Or you think we've got enough going here?
Yeah.
All right. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, Michael. Thanks.
Okay. Take care. Blessings. Bye-bye.
Our next
All right,
caller
Miss Jenny, you've got another hand up.
Doug, 314. You're on the air.
Hey, I'd like to invite you, Jeannie, to leave Susan unmuted. I want to start with a comment to her, and I want to say that when Michael, I think it's Michael that often says when you have the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm calling about my process, and there was something that Susan said, and then kind of showed up a few places for me in the context of where I'm at, which is if she's feeling resentful or uncomfortable with the amount of service that they're giving to this man, maybe it would be useful to look at the reason why they're doing it. And I heard her say something about an unwelcomed Down syndrome child, and then maybe this is an opportunity to make up for that. And it's just like I'm becoming aware in my worksheet of how some of my, and I'll go into that momentarily, but my motivation for doing things, for doing good, for being a good person, is to cover up, content in me that doesn't feel good about me, and or guilt, etc. And so, if my offering is, if you're doing something in the way of service because you're pure acting as love, you're a pure flow of Shakti, there's not going to be resentment. And you're not going to be off-center with how much service you offer. But if you're doing it out of some other non-being motivation, then that leaves you vulnerable to that. So that's the thought there. I don't know.
Nice catch,
Still unmuted. Huh? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, but...
Michael said something.
Go ahead,
and I
Susan.
said something. I just said that is a great thought. I want to get to the place where I'm loving doing this. I'm feeling. Yeah.
Go ahead.
It isn't there. It isn't there. It
Wait.
is. I see the need, and we have the space, but I haven't got the space in my heart always. Sometimes I do. I go in and out, and I don't like the out.
That it just adds to the supposition that I offered you in my mind. It's like, okay, so if that's true, and if you're afraid to do a love exchange, and it's like, why are you doing it then?
Well, there are a lot of practical reasons why I'm doing it, but to actually open and do a love exchange, I go into a tailspin. I feel extremely vulnerable with the idea of doing that. And so that's what Michael suggested, that I do some work on that. So,
yeah.
But you're right. You're right about what you said. That was very good.
The love will bring up transparency to everything in you that's unlike love as well, including a guilt-driven reason for serving him or whatever else might be under there. So it's, doing the love exchange will bring it up for him, but it'll bring it up for you.
Yeah.
Whatever's hidden that you're afraid of anyway. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Well, go ahead with your stuff because time is running out.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
All right. Holding space for you, Susan. Next layer, next level. Whatever's in that file on functioning as love. It sounds like you're getting ready to heal the next layer of it, so that's awesome. Great input, Doug. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's my own thing, in a way. It's like we only have 10 minutes here, so maybe we'll see. But, so much comes up when I get ready to talk about my stuff on this show, and I can see now that a big part of that is so let me just try and put this in a practical order. I'm going through a lot of emotional content, and I'm sitting with it, doing worksheets on it, feeling into it, and have been for a long time over this change in my relationship with my primary love person in my life, and
Right.
I just yesterday I was just feeling this massive amounts of aloneness, and I in my worksheet process I could see that it took me a long time to get to the bottom of the emotion, and I don't even know if worthless is an emotion, but it's as close as word as I could get.
Worthless, did you say?
Yes, worthless.
I'd offer that's a thought.
It seemed to me to be. I couldn't get to. It certainly worked from a worksheet, but I couldn't get to. I mean, is aloneness a thought too, or is that a feeling?
Aloneness would be a thought.
Okay. So
lonely
maybe I need
would be an emotion.
Lonely. Okay. So I felt lonely yesterday, and very strong emotion around that. And I ended up putting worthless in 1B, and it led me to do a worksheet on the subject 1C alone, being alone, and since we don't have a lot of time, the bottom line of it all is that I could see that underneath a whole lot of things for me is a sense of unworthiness, and that a lot of my actions, way more than I ever thought, were coming forward because of an attempt to feel worthy. And that's why I had that hammer in my hand and had that comment for Susan, because,
right,
it's like, yeah, I just see, I don't really have a specific question here. My desire in entering this is just to because I always know that even though I don't want to talk about it, and even that, it's like to be vulnerable on the show. I usually do it pretty well, but it's like I feel like, oh, if I bring all this out, people are going to think badly of me, and it's like all of this ridiculous content that's in there. It's just, and everything that you said today in your intro, it's just so rich. It's so rich in my experience of. I'm an example of all that content, and so
what goal did you cancel on that worksheet
I
you did?
canceled the goal on that worksheet. I have girlfriend Diane, close loving friends, and a good relationship with my grandson. And mainly it's, girlfriend. I have a good relationship with her, because that's the underlying goal that I got to for the thing that I want that is triggering all of this. I have all this content underneath it.
So my offering would be that what I'm hearing is that the goals plural that you want to be canceling, being in step number 3 in the worksheet, is the goal to be valued, to be worthy. This would be a separate one. To be cherished.
Valued and worthy. You would put those as two different ones.
Yes.
Valued, worthy, and cherished. Yes, valued, worthy, and cherished. I sure see that, because that really, that's everything in this worksheet is about me doing things all my life to try and be what I was calling worthy, but valued. I'm going to write this down. Valued, cherished,
and worthy.
And worthy, yeah.
The other shade of it that would produce still a different piece of the healing of this whole underlying complex would be just breathe on that for a minute.
Cherished is powerful, and I was seeing out of this worksheet how I want to serve, I want to bless people, I wanted to bless her, I wanted to love her, always trying to do things for her, and in spite of all of that, all of this loneliness, all of these emotions were brought forward in me because she, from my perspective, basically said, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not what she wants. And that's, again, I could then see that I pursue relationships in an attempt to get what you just said. Basically, I was saying worthy, but cherished, valued. Somebody to say, oh, yeah, I like you. You're cool. You're a good person, and I love you. There's a stronger word than pursue. Desperate. Somewhere I wrote it in there. Desperately want. I desperately pursue, and that was part of the thing that Diane was saying to me, is that I can't be your happiness. It's like I'm wish I could find it, but anyway, okay. So I'm listening again.
So I take each of those as goals that you hold where you're the object in number 1C, and canceling the need to value myself, to honor myself, to cherish myself, to perceive myself as valuable. We'll bring it home on another level.
Okay, so I'm the subject, and I'm canceling goals. My goals on these worksheets are to be valued,
right,
to cherish, to be worthy. Separate goals on different worksheets. Yeah.
Yeah, the first time we talked about it to have others do that, and now to do the same series of worksheets on holding that space of valuing yourself, of cherishing yourself, of honoring yourself. And somewhere intuitively the key thought keeps coming in of trust, that perhaps another place that would produce some results would be trusting the Creator. Is that if the object of attention on the worksheet in 1C were the Creator, then trusting the Creator would be another that would probably open some of the unconscious files that need to be opened and cleared out.
So should I be having a goal of trusting the Creator on that worksheet and
yes.
canceling that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm suggesting now.
Okay.
And as you clean that trust of the Creator up, there's going to be a different connectedness that isn't a head connectedness to the Creator, but a heart connectedness.
Yeah, that's definitely where I want to get to. 7A goal was feeling into Shakti expressed in joy, just being that love and doing and being out of it instead of doing things to try and be worthy, cherished, and so forth.
Right. And all that it takes, Doug, to deserve it all is just that the Creator put the breath of life in you. That's all. You deserve it just because the Creator saw you worthy to put the breath of life into. Nothing else is required.
All righty.
Breathing with you, and the show is going to cut us off any second. But
yep, it gave us an extra couple minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, my friend. You have a blessed one.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have the best year yet of your eternal life.